Hi, everyone. Welcome to Designing an Objective Search Process for Nonprofits. We'll get started here in just a moment. My name is Dane Castillo. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the marketing associate here at Agility. I'll also be your webinar support. So we'll get started just now. It looks like more people are filling in. Awesome. Hope everyone is having a great day so far, or great morning, depending on where you are at. All righty. All right, so while you all are coming in, I would love to get some introductions today. So while you're settling in, please go ahead and drop your name, your pronouns, and your role in the chat just to say hi. For those coming in, welcome. Hi, Nihia. Hello, Emily, welcome. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. For those who are just joining us, my name is Dane Castillo. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the marketing associate here, so I will be supporting y'all with any technical issues if they come up during this webinar, which of course they're not, because we're going to have a very smooth, amazing, enjoyable webinar, and y'all are going to leave this learning a bunch of stuff. So for now, please go ahead and drop your name and pronouns and your role in the chat, and we'll get started really soon. Now, while you're doing that, your lovely host would like you to think about a question, just keep in the back of your mind. So since this is talking about designing a search process, we want you to kind of think about a role that you would like to design or redesign a search for. Just kind of keep that in the back of your mind while we start this, okay? Awesome, love it. Seeing a lot of talent consultants, a lot of managers, talent, recruitment, awesome. Love it. Welcome, everyone. Seeing a few more people coming in here, so we'll just wait for them to get set up and introduce themselves. All right, so now that we have most people, I think, in, I'm just going to go over some kind of housekeeping. So during this webinar, we will have some time for you to interact. There will be a moment when you can go ahead and raise your hand via the little raise hand button here in the webinar, or you can drop your answer in the chat. So go ahead and do that. And once we open those moments, and I will unmute you and you'll be able to chat freely. And other times we'll have you answer a poll, and we have a really fun word cloud one coming up as well. So keep an eye out for those moments of participation, because we're excited to hear from you and, hear your thoughts on this. So I think most people are here now, and I see a bunch of people have already introduced themselves. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for doing that. So I'm actually going to go ahead and hand it over to our hosts, Hadley and Jonathan, to just get us started and introduce themselves. Oh, yes. One last thing. Hadley made this very lovely free tool that you can go ahead and scan that QR code with your phone. I'll also drop a link in the chat. And you can go ahead and download this tool that will help you throughout this webinar. Just kind of keep track of the questions and everything like that. So go ahead and download that if you'd like. All right, now I'm going to officially hand it over to you and Jonathan.
All right, good afternoon, good morning, anyone on the West Coast. Thank you all for being here. Really appreciate you carving out time to join us today. I'm Jonathan Howard. I'm an associate partner here at Agility. You can read a little bit about me. If you are multitasking and you have LinkedIn up, please hit us up please find me and connect with me on LinkedIn if you can.
Thanks so much for being here, everyone. I'm Hadley Kornacki. I'm a principal here at Agility. And yes, I would love to connect with folks as well. You can learn a little bit more about me here on the slide and also on LinkedIn. And looking forward to engaging with you all today. Thanks so much. Oops. Oh dear.
So we try to build this out to be, to be interactive, so you can actually start thinking about a potential role that you may be working on, looking to redesign a selection process for. So really excited, but we'd be remiss if we didn't just share a little bit about Agility. Agility, we're a talent equity consulting firm first and foremost. As my colleague Travani Mackey likes to say, the system isn't set up for some folks, for a lot of folks in this world to succeed. So we work really hard to just help our clients hire and build their leadership benches to be reflective of the communities they serve. We care deeply about ensuring that women, people of color, and others have access to leadership opportunities. And then we really want to support them so that they have the talent systems and processes in place so that they can focus on the real work of the real work they're trying to do and the impact they're trying to have.
Apologies. As Jonathan said, we're a talent equity consulting firm, and our services include search, compensation design, and talent systems. So if your org or anyone you know needs help with any of these, just let us know.
Oh, and just real quick plug, since I mentioned Travani, just hit me. Our colleague Travani Mackey, she has a DEI cohort that she's launching in the fall called Walk the Talk. May be interesting to some of you or some of the leaders in your organization. So Dana, I don't know if you could just drop that in the chat so people can learn about it, but just wanted to put that out there since we're talking about Travani. Thank you. So before we dive in, we wanted to just give you just a kind of high level of how we think about search process design. When we start to put together a search process, we start from a place of equity, right? Equity is always top of mind. We're thinking about how are we working to mitigate bias in the process? How do we ensure that our process allows folks to shine? We really want to focus on people's experience and strengths. And we really want to be intentional about their experience, their skills, and how they align to what the org needs, right? If you're like me a long time ago, right, you kind of just waited until a role came up or someone said, hey, we have this opening, and you maybe Googled a job description and just scrambled to kind of get it out there. But what we're trying to do here is like really encourage you all to take a step back and like really think deeply about the role and do some information gathering to just really make sure you're building out a really good profile.
Yeah, and so our approach has led to some results that we're really proud of. And one of the major drivers of these results is implementing an objective search process, a competency-driven search process. And that's what we're going to focus on today. We'll focus on the components of an objective search, and we're also going to guide you through some initial thinking about the role that you identified as you hopped on. If you hopped on a little bit later, just be thinking of a role that you might like to design or redesign a search process for. It'll help us as we go through the thinking about the objective search process steps.
And just one more side before we dive in, like when we build processes this way, again, just back to the whole like mission of Agility and the work we do, like we're trying to help ensure that people who most experience structural racism and discrimination, it's a real thing in hiring processes. Just we want to make sure those folks have a real opportunity to land the role that historically land roles that they historically have not had access to. So that's what this is all about. So the first piece, and we're going to spend a lot of time here. And again, there's going to be places for you to stop and think and jot and think about a potential role you're working on. But it's all about defining the outcomes and competencies for the role. So the way we do it here, we call it our discovery process. It's basically just a big information gathering. When we're engaging with an organization to do a search, we spend a lot of time doing stakeholder engagement. So having one-on-one conversations with key folks who have insight into the organization, what's going well, what the growth areas for the organization are, what the needs are for this role. We typically will do a survey that can be sent to all stakeholders, so staff, families, like whoever your constituents are, to get their feedback. It's a really great tool for just being inclusive and making sure that you are just allowing everyone to have a voice. And we also, depending on the role, right, it will do focus groups with key folks, town halls, if necessary. Obviously, this, it depends on the role, right? You're probably not going to do a town hall for like every single role that you're working on. But we do have and this is going to be different for every org, right? So the hope is that you'll start thinking about this, and then as you begin doing this work and redesigning and designing your selection processes, you'll start to figure out internally who those like key folks are that you need to be getting information from.
Great. And so, as we said, we'd love for you to start thinking about the role that you identified. Take a moment. If you're using the guided note taker, you'll see that there's a question right there on the guided note taker. If you joined us late, you'll see that there's a link to a guided note taker in the chat. And then Dane also put this question in the chat as well. So for the role that you identified that you might like to design or redesign a search for, who would you want to engage in the discovery process? So be thinking about which voices would you want to hear, which perspectives would you want to hear? Take a moment to jot that down on your notebook or the guided note taker that we provided. We will want to hear from some folks. And so there's two ways to participate. You can raise your hand and Dane will be able to bring you off mute, or you can put an answer in the chat. Now, you don't need to use specific names, of course, because we're not deeply engaged with the names of folks at your organization, but you can put the types of roles. So for example, if you work in a school, you may want to think about hearing perspectives from teachers, as well as school leaders, as well as parents and families. Once you've had a moment to do some thinking on your own, if you want to put an answer in the chat, that would be great. Or Dane, I'll rely on you. I can't see folks' hands. So if you see a hand raised, go ahead and you can bring somebody off mute as well.
Thanks, Hadley. I think we're still thinking here a little bit. It's a big question and a big one to start with, but we definitely want to hear what y'all think. Hadley, would you like to give us maybe an example to get us started? I'm not sure if you want to start with maybe like a manager role or a higher, like a role in leadership or something like that, just to get kind of the wheels going.
Yep, that's a great idea. So if you're thinking about, let's think about, so the example I gave a moment ago would fit well for a school leader, because you want to make sure you have perspectives across the entire school community. But if you're thinking about, say that you're at an organization where you maybe were hiring a director of marketing, for example, you might want to think about who will this person work most closely with, who would be their colleagues, who might be their direct reports, who might have crossover work with them. So for example, you might be thinking about folks who work in development. There's just a few ideas to get you thinking about folks you might want to include.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Thank you, Amanda. We've got a new chief of staff role. I'd engage, oh, can you see that, Hadley?
Yep, I can see the
Awesome.
chat, I just can't see it. So you'd engage the CEOs, the hiring manager, definitely want to get their perspective. Direct reports for the role, board members, that's a great one to mention that I left out. And they would be interacting with the board. That's a great example. Thank you. And you can see that each of these folks would have really different perspectives likely. And so you'll be able to learn more about the organization and about the role. Thanks so much, Amanda. I know that folks are thinking and doing some of this work on their own on the note taker in their notebook. So I'm going to let you do that. We're going to move on to the next one.
All right, so let's get into the meat of this. So one of the big things you're trying to work out is you want to identify the role mission, right? And we think about a role, like a mission for each role, in the same way that an org might think about like an organization's mission, right? So for an CEO or an ED of an organization, the role mission is often just very aligned to the mission of the org. What you want to get folks, whether it's one-on-one, whether it's in a focus group, you really want them to you want to get them talking stream of consciousness, right? You want them to sort of spill and tell you everything that they can that they're thinking about this role. The final mission, once you have it worked out, should serve as a headline. So we sort of internally at Agility use our role missions, like that's sort of our pitch, right? If anybody's asking us about a role, like the role mission is sort of like where we go. But you want to know what the role is all about. Why does it exist? Why does the organization need this role? By the way, right, like these are just some of the questions we ask, right? Like these are questions that, you will start to sort of compile and develop and like sort of tweak as you, to fit your organization. And just wanted to share an example of a role mission from a role we recently worked on for you. So I'll let you all take a look at that.
Now, we're not going to ask you to create a role mission right now for the role that you're considering designing your process for, because of course that involves stakeholder engagement and really hearing lots of perspectives. But do want you to think about, as we move into the next stages, initial thoughts on what you think the role mission might be for the role that you're considering.
Thanks, Dane. And it's kind of like backwards planning, right? Like you start with a role mission, and then you kind of start working your way through the other questions that you'll need to address as you're putting this selection process and role and scorecard, et cetera, together. So the next piece you're gonna think about, and you want your stakeholders that you're engaging with to think about, is identifying role. What are the core responsibilities for the role? So what work streams will this person own? Who are they going to work with? Who are they going to manage? Are there any indirect relationships that they're going to have to be aware of and manage? And ultimately, what part is this person going to play in the organization's leadership, right? So really, like, again, stream of consciousness, like you really need to get down like every possible sort of work stream and thing that this person's going to do. And this piece is this piece will later, as you're drafting the job description, this is where the core responsibilities will be most helpful. So again, just wanted to share another example, kind of building off the same role. So this is just one of the core responsibilities we took from the chief equity role. But again, I won't read it out to you, but just take a second to just review that. But again, this is really about you starting to think about the role that you have in mind, starting to think about those things for that role.
And one thing I'd say too, Jonathan, going back to, that first question about role mission, why does this role even exist? Why do we even need to have this role at this organization? That seems like it is a huge question, but it's usually if you start with that question and then you bring people in your stakeholder conversations down to these questions, it helps them refine their thinking and sort of start connecting all the responsibilities to, the overall mission of the role. And so while it seems like a big question to start with, it actually can be a great driver for getting to these more specific questions. And so what I'd love for you to do now is take a moment to jot down 2 to 3 core responsibilities for the role that you chose. I'd love to have folks share out. You don't need to share 2 or 3. You can just share 1. So for example, if I were to be going back to the example I shared about the marketing director, perhaps that person is responsible for creating a marketing plan, with a marketing calendar, an annual marketing calendar. That'd be a great example. They also, another example might be that they are, they're responsible for driving, increasing engagement on social media by X percentage. So if there's one that you'd like to share, we'd love to hear it. I know there's lots of folks on here thinking about roles they're working on. You can raise your hand or you can put one right in the chat. So as you're thinking here, probably really helpful to think about things that perhaps they can be measured. Perhaps they are, work products that will work across different teams. Let's see, I see here. Oh, I have somebody new who's joined us. Thanks so much. Glad you're here, Patsy.
And just want to acknowledge we understand, like it is hard to sort of think of these in the moment, right? And it is a longer process, and where you need to take time to really think about these things in order to put them together. So I just want to acknowledge that as well.
Okay, so Patsy, I think, was sharing the recruiting and onboarding for a small nonprofit org. So thinking about that as one of the required responsibilities. That's super helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Patsy.
I'm going to move us to our next focus area.
So the next piece, right? And again, you're sort of just building on top of each of these pieces, right? The next piece is thinking about key deliverables and role outcomes, right? Like this is really important because when you get to the actual screening and selection process, these are the things that you're going to want to, you're going to need to figure out if folks have the experience and the skills necessary to accomplish these things. So the big difference between deliverable and an outcome. Deliverables are outputs and end products. So the example down there, might be to develop and finalize a program roadmap, right? Could be to put together a strategic plan, something like that. It's like some kind of actual product that they are going to create. And then outcomes are the impacts, right? So the outcomes are the more measurable thing. So what are we trying to achieve? What must be accomplished? And so, thinking through the goals that you have. And again, this is a really, it's really important to spend the time with the folks who are going, the hiring manager, the board, whoever else is involved, whatever other key stakeholders you're talking to as you're putting together your role profile. Because ultimately, this is what it comes down to, right? If you're a school and, one of the big goals for the school leader is to increase student achievement, right? You want to be able to be explicit in your selection process to ask them about their experience doing that in past roles.
Okay, so as Dane mentioned at the beginning, we have a fun word cloud that we can use here. And so what I'd love to have you do is, for the opening that you identified, please identify at least one key deliverable or one outcome. And I'll go back to the other slide in a moment once folks have had a chance to either click on the link, which I think Dane is also going to put into the chat, or if you've had a chance to scan the QR code. So what is one key deliverable or one outcome that you would want to identify for the role that you have in mind? I'll just go back here to give you some examples.
All right, seeing some answers come in here. Seeing some stuff about fundraising. Okay, leading, supporting leading the organization's equity goals. Some of these are just words, so I'm gonna fill in the blanks here.
We'd love to hear from somebody too. I know it's intimidating, could be intimidating to put your voice out there, but if anybody feels brave, we'd love someone to speak up and tell us about the role they're working on and the deliverables and role outcomes you're thinking about.
All right, we've got our first participant. All right, one moment. All right, Patsy, gonna unmute you here.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Patsy.
Hi. When I'm thinking about like deliverables and outcomes, for instance, as I mentioned, one of my bigger responsibilities as in my role is onboarding and recruiting. So with that, right now, working towards enhancing our onboarding process to ensure that it's inclusive, engaging, and thoughtful, so that individuals, when they come into our organization, they feel that and they understand, the organization as a whole, that they kind of have a guide, and that we are here for them throughout the their life and support of them being with our organization. So our outcome is really ensuring that we are being tight so that in our process, so that employees are not feeling lost or feeling like there's something missing in their onboarding process, and more so ensuring that our turnaround is lowered, just because right now we are living in a time in which turnaround is a big factor in a lot of organizations. So by the onboarding process from the beginning feeling like it's inclusive, it's supportive, not just from like the standpoint of myself, like creating the orientation and onboarding process, but also with their hiring managers as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Patsy. What's your organization, Patsy?
Generation Citizen.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Thank you. So that I think that's the onboarding, like basically building out the onboarding, that's the deliverable, right? Like building out an inclusive, engaging onboarding process. And then maybe an outcome from that, right, that you can think about is, like you survey new hires, right? Like how, like, you could have a goal, an outcome around, the percentage of new hires who had rated the onboarding experience, a 4 out of 5 or better, right? So really appreciate you sharing that example.
Oh yeah, thank you.
And thanks for being brave.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? I mean, we'd love to hear from one other person, if we could.
Yeah, Jonathan, I think we have one question which might be related to a key deliverable. Danny G mentioned any recommendations for increasing membership signups for nonprofits. Danny, can you elaborate? And you can come and raise your hand if you'd like. Is this related to a key deliverable? And you can always add that in the chat as well. Apologies if I'm putting you on the spot. We can come back to that question as well.
And Danny, we're gonna stick around at the end. So if you want to stick around after the webinar, we're happy to chat with you more about that.
It looks like it is related, though. I see Danny just responded in the chat there.
Perfect.
Oh, perfect. Thanks, Danny. Great. Good. Great. And so I know some other responses we've seen have been designing a coaching plan for our leadership team, hiring teachers are other ones that we've seen. I'm not sure if you're seeing any others on your end, Dan.
No, looks like
Okay.
we can go ahead and move on.
Great, thanks.
All right, and the last piece of this, right? So you've come up with your outcomes, you come up with your core responsibilities, you have your role mission. The last thing you need to do is think about the competencies that are necessary to achieve the outcomes, right? So these, these things are all related, like they're going to come out at different times, but you do want to make sure you have explicit, like you do spend time thinking about each of these things explicitly, right? So what are the necessary skills that someone needs in the context of the role? Maybe there's, often what we find is there's particular skills that are required to sort of to operate like within certain organizations, right? And so there's different cultures, right? And those things that you'll need to think about. What are the prior career experiences or functional expertise someone needs? You want to think about lived experience as well. Like, are there certain lived experiences that folks will have that we want to prioritize in someone for this role? Competency examples are here's some competency examples that we use that we typically see. But this is like really a place where, as you start doing these for more and more roles, like you'll really start building a big list of competencies that you can pull from. And like the next step to to this kind of session is, once you have your competencies, then like sort of defining them and like really just building out like what they mean, what the specific things you're looking for, and how you're going to find those. But just wanted to give you some examples that we see come up often in our searches.
Yeah, and just to clarify, Jonathan, as we move forward, in our session today, we're going to show you more detail about how you might listen for evidence of folks' ability to reach these competencies. So, for example, if we're looking at the people manager and developer, you might have a descriptor or a listen for that you include when defining your competency that says exactly what this means to you in the context of the role. And so also to tie in what you said before, Jonathan, about about the context of the role, the context in the particular organization. So perhaps this person needs to be a people manager and developer in a large complex organization, or in an organization that's going through a period of tremendous change and growth. And so really always thinking about, what does it mean to be a people manager and developer, for example, in this particular role, in this particular moment. Great. Okay, so now Dane has a poll for us. For this poll, what I'd love for you to do is choose one competency that you would like to include, or you think you might like to include for the role that you have identified that you might like to design or redesign a search process for. So go ahead and just indicate this in the poll. Perhaps you need to make sure that this person is a strategic thinker. They have great project management skills. This person might need to be a fundraiser. They may need to not only be a fundraiser, but be able to, navigate the external environment as well. We'll take a moment there to vote. Everybody can choose. I think you can just choose one. Is that right, Dane?
Yes, multiple choice. Definitely seeing a bunch of answers in here already. This is great. All right. Let's have a few more answers in here. Remember, there's no really, that's fine, Patsy, if you can select. Yeah, it's multiple choice, so you can select more than one, but.
Yeah, and you definitely will have more than one competency. So actually feel free to choose more than one. If it does allow you to do that, that's great. We try, when we're building out the competency list, and we'll show you an example of this in a moment, we try to find the right balance of having enough competencies that we're really clearly defining the necessary competencies for the role, but not so many competencies that we're unable to assess them throughout the process, or that it provides sort of a lack of clarity to everyone involved in the process.
All righty, let's see. Everyone get a chance to pick their competencies. I'm going to go ahead and close it here so we can look at the results. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll now. And we are going to share.
Yeah, please do. Okay. Mission and vision aligns. Absolutely. We traditionally work with organizations that are mission driven. And this is, I can't think of a scorecard we've had that did not have this competency on it. So it's not surprising to see so many of you choosing that. Relationship building is incredibly important across all types of roles. So again, not surprised to see that one up high as well. Thank you so much for your participation in choosing these. This is super helpful. And then somebody asked a great question. How many competencies should be assessed at each stage of the interview process, and how many is too many? That is a really good question, because what we want you to do, and actually this is a good transition into the next section. So I will take us there. You actually want to create a scorecard that you're going to use that names all of the competencies that you're going to use throughout the entire search process. So instead of defining certain competencies to use at different stages, we recommend defining the competencies that you'll assess throughout the entire process. And the question of how many is too many is one that we spend a lot of time thinking about. We traditionally find that, I would say, between 5 and 8 is probably a number that we most commonly land on. But really what we're trying to do is find that right balance of, being really, really clear about the expectations, but not also, overloading the list of competencies and therefore the list of, responsibilities, key deliverables. This has to be representative of the work that will be done for the role. And so let me show you an example of what that looks like. So like I said here, we have about 5 to 7 competencies. And I mentioned before that we use descriptors. We also use measurable language, which is really important. And I'd like to share this with you. Let's see. So as you think about all of the work that you've done that's kind of led up to this stage, right? So you've talked with folks, you've engaged with them through stakeholder conversations. You have defined the role mission. You have defined, which you'll see right here on the scorecard, you've defined the key responsibilities, the outcomes, the competencies. You can now create this tool. And this scorecard is the tool that you'll use throughout the entire process as an objective measure of a candidate's ability to reach the competencies. This is a really helpful tool, not only for organizing all of the thinking that you've already done, but also for reducing bias in the process, right? If you are at every stage comparing the candidates to the competencies and measuring them on them, instead of measuring them on extraneous information or comparing them just to each other, then you're much more likely to end up with an equitable result and provide access, as Jonathan mentioned earlier. And so you'll see here that what we have is we have the competencies in bold, and then we have those descriptors or listen fors that I mentioned before. And you can also see that we use measurable language. And so, for example, let me give an example. I'm going to scroll down here. Demonstrated experience attracting, selecting, retaining, and developing talent with a focus on equity and supporting their aspirations. So this candidate, it's not enough for us to look at a resume and say, oh yes, this person has hired people before. We need to have evidence of their ability to attract, select, retain, and develop talent, all with a focus on equity and supporting those team members' aspirations as well. And so, as you can imagine, we're aligning all of our interview questions to these descriptors as well. Just going to scroll down and give you a chance to look at this as well.
And you'll see also that there's a column for rating right there, and you can kind of see how we score them. That's another piece that, right, depending on who the hiring team is, whether it's a hiring manager search or if you're working with a committee, that you'll want to customize to what works for your organization and your context. But you definitely want to calibrate with folks, right, so that you are, being consistent in how you are rating and assessing candidates.
Absolutely. Okay. So once you've created the scorecard, you can kind of see here, like Jonathan said, we're sort of backward planning, right? So you can, now that you've created the scorecard, you can create the draft job description. So it can be, I think a lot of times when you have an opening, when one has an opening, they sort of think about what's a job description that I've seen for that before that looks really good, or what's a template that I can use, or even these days, ChatGPT is out there and can write a job description pretty quickly. And so what we really try to do is, of course, we want to leverage all resources that are available, but what's really important is that we are leveraging all of the great work that we've already done to define the responsibilities, the outcomes, the competencies, and we are creating the marketing tool, which is the job description, the marketing tool for the role that is aligned to each of those things. That provides clarity to potential applicants and prospects. It also, it furthers that objective approach in that there is total transparency throughout the entire communication stream. So the job description should include the responsibilities. It should include the skills necessary to achieve the competencies. It can be really easy to kind of think about, okay, well, here are the skills that I think somebody might need in order to do this job. But if you actually think really objectively, what are the skills necessary to achieve the competencies that you've defined? That will help you really hone in on a very clear list of skills that you want to make sure to include, especially because you want to make sure that you don't sort of have an exhaustive laundry list. You really want them to be clear and targeted. And then the other thing you're going to want to do is think about what are the prior experiences and naming which are preferred and which are required, and being really thoughtful about that as well, that align to the competencies and the outcomes. So as you're drafting that job description, you have your organization overview, you have a summary of the role, And then you have your responsibilities, skills, and prior experiences that align directly to your scorecard. Okay, now you have built the tools for your search, and it's time to jump into candidate screening and assessment. You now have all the tools you need to do that objectively.
And the way we think about this, right? As well, yeah. So all this stuff is built. Now you have candidates. Now you're engaging with candidates. You're reviewing resumes. You're starting the interview process. The way we use it is really as a running record. So all evidence that we're collecting, right? So whether it's from the resume, we do one-way video interviews with candidates early in the process. We're sort of collecting all the evidence, and it's all being recorded and housed in the scorecard. So Hadley, if you wanted to show that example, just wanted to again just show you another example, right? What a filled out scorecard looks like. We actually took out the ratings. We don't want to have ratings in here, but it could be a quote from a candidate in a conversation you had, or from the video interview. It could just be a bullet that's pulled from their resume. But the idea is like any evidence that's related to one of the competencies you're looking for is there, so that whoever is making the decision, whether it's you sort of making a cut decision as the recruiter, or if you're sharing it with your hiring manager, or if you're sharing it with a broader committee, just has the information readily available in a clear and concise way. And again, back to what Hadley said, right? It's about removing bias from the process, and really just trying to be as objective as possible, and focusing on folks' experience and skills and evidence that you can find of their ability to do whatever job you're looking for.
We know there's a lot to take in here, and we won't be able to read it just on the screen. And so, I know that we'll be sharing some resources after this session, so you'll have a chance to look at things a little bit more deeply. And we're always happy, like Jonathan said, to stay on after to chat a bit more, or set up a call to chat more about this. I absolutely, love using the scorecards. It's something that drives my work each and every day. And so I'm always happy to chat about it. Now, oops, sorry about that. I want to go to the next slide here. There we go. Okay. So you have created your scorecard. You're now using your scorecard as a running record. Now, what you want to do is you want to keep collecting evidence of the candidate's ability to reach the competencies. And you're going to do this throughout all screening stages. But when you get to the more formal interview stages, so perhaps you're engaging a committee or a panel of folks, or perhaps you're getting input from families and parents, what you're going to want to do is make sure that you have a survey. That survey should be directly aligned to the competencies. So it's the name of the competency. Maybe you have the descriptors there to make sure people have that clarity right in front of them. And then you have a rating scale. So typically, and that rating scale, if I can toggle between, here we go. So that rating scale would directly align with the same rating scale you used on the scorecard. So there's consistency throughout. Now, you'll want to have everybody who engages with the candidate, no matter what stage they're in. Once you get to that more formal stage, you'll want to have them complete a survey. Now, those surveys, one thing that's really important about them is that they should be completed before you have a chance to talk about or debrief candidates. The reason for that is the moment, or that is a very common moment when groupthink or other biases can creep in, and then you're sort of removing an objective assessment opportunity and sort of inviting in bias. And so we highly recommend a competency aligned survey completed before folks have a chance to talk about it. And then when it comes to the actual decision making, that also can be heavily driven by competencies. So you'll look at the survey data that you've gathered. You can look at that by respondent group. You can look at it by specific competencies. So for example, if you know that you have somebody coming in, or if you have an opening let's use that marketing director one. And you know that that person needs to be able to manage a website, but they don't need to be able to design that website. Then you'd want to make sure that you're thinking about whatever competency you had aligned to that. You'd want to make sure that you're not sort of overemphasizing that one. Want to think about, where can we support this person? Where do we have room to coach them as you're debriefing? So all of that can be driven by the objective data that you have. Usually in those surveys, we do have some qualitative data as well, but we do ask folks to tie any comments they have to the competencies. So again, that we're being as objective as possible. And during that decision-making session, we typically what we do is we discuss areas of misalignment. So for example, if let's go back to that marketing director example, if somebody who is a direct report perhaps rated them not very well in one particular competency, and somebody who would be their colleague rated them, much higher, that might be an area of misalignment and opportunity for discussion. Really wanting to dig into those discussions and make sure that you're making, very strong decisions about candidates, but also, again, grounding them in the evidence that you've gathered. The other thing you can do is make sure that you are identifying probe areas for future interviews. So those surveys and those discussions are perfect for identifying your next round of questioning for your next round of interviews. Great. So we are very happy to answer questions, to work with you on the role that you're working on, to think about how we might be able to best support you. But before we do that, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love for you to complete our survey. And we'd love to connect with you. And so, Dane, correct me if I'm wrong, but this QR code will give a chance of folks to connect with us. And the next one, it will be the survey. Is that right?
Yes, that should be correct. And we'll also go ahead and send out some information about connecting with Jonathan and Hadley in our follow-up email as well. So if you don't want to scan it now, that's fine. We will go ahead and make sure that you have that information.
Thanks, Dane.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you all for joining us today. Again, we know this is some pretty, it's the material that takes a while to digest and think about. So we really appreciate you joining us. And again, we're happy to be thought partners with you as you're thinking about the different roles you're designing selection processes for.
So before we open to Q&A, since we have a few more minutes here, please go ahead and take our survey. Let us know if you found this information useful. It's really helpful for us to know what you find useful about this so that we can make sure to tailor our webinars and continue to give you all great tips. So I'll go ahead and drop the survey link in the chat. And Jonathan and Hadley, we actually have, I believe, our first question other than Danny's question. So would you all like to jump into some Q&A?
That'd be great.
All right.
Sure. Feel free to, if you got to drop off, that's fine too. But we're here for a few, maybe about 5-10 more minutes if folks want to stick around and chat.
Yes, we will be, just a reminder to everyone, we will be sharing these resources afterwards, including a recording of this webinar. So if you had to hop off, have to hop off at any point now, we will be sending this to you as well. All right, looks like we have a question coming in from Laura. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute you.
Great. Can you hear me?
Hi, Laura. Yes.
So thank you for this, really helpful. I work at a small nonprofit. It's 8 full-time staff, so very small. We don't actually have a full-time HR. I do the kind of HR responsibilities along with a number of other things. And one of the questions that always comes up when we're talking about search processes, is kind of that first stage of like taking, if we are getting 100+ resumes and then narrowing that down to say, 12 to 15 kind of first round screening interviews, how to manage that workload. Traditionally, it's just been something that I do myself using like a rubric. You called it the scorecard and we've called it the rubric, but sort of the same idea. But but we've had questions from staff like asking how they can help participate in that. My inclination's always been it's kind of better for one person to do it, so you're not getting like multiple people kind of using the rubric in different ways. But that's just been like, again, my sort of the history of how we've done it. So I'm curious to hear kind of any thoughts on that, like initial screening round and how to make it more manageable and approachable, especially if you have maybe multiple people who want to get involved.
Thanks, Laura. I mean, it's a great question. I mean, for us, we really, that discovery process, right? So like, that's where we would ask for folks' input, right? And then, you can think through like how, if depending on what the role is, right? If it makes sense to sort of have like a small committee. I know you're a really small organization, so maybe not, but like if you want to have a small committee of 2 or 3 people that are sort of, once the scorecard is created, once the job description is there, that are, vetting candidates, I think it's fine to, as long as you have a clear scorecard or rubric, right? To have one person that's doing the initial screening, but it could be helpful to just get more involvement, either just on the discovery process, so people feel like they've given you their input, and then that they can actually see their input in the job description, or in the rubric, and just trust that sort of whoever's doing the initial screening is making good decisions on who to move forward. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, we definitely, I think that's one of the big takeaways that I have, is just bulking up like what the process is of engaging people prior to the review process. We've generally sent around the rubric and asked just, does anyone have thoughts or questions, but not really gotten more deeply into it. So I think having more of the discovery process up front might, like you said, kind of circumvent any of those questions about how the scorecard is being used or the rubric.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one thought there too is through that discovery process. I know I mentioned when we were talking about the job description that you'll identify what are the absolute necessities when it comes to, say, an experience. And so that can help make the resume review more manageable, because whether you're, tapping into a system like I know Indeed does this, and a lot of ATSs do this, where you can actually ask screening questions that, for those required experiences, that can potentially, whittle down your pool. But if you engage folks in the discovery process early on, and then everybody can align on, yes, this is a must have versus a nice to have, those must haves can help, reduce that screening as well.
And there's a question in the Q&A from an anonymous attendee. It says, would you recommend doing a scorecard from the phone interview stage, or more from when interviews begin? Lastly, any recommendations on the best way to implement a scorecard rating? We currently have selector materials in which they write notes during the interviews and take a survey after to see how the candidate matched against its competencies, and would love to implement a scorecard. Great questions. Really good to hear that you have like those processes in place. I mean, our recommendation is to use a scorecard from the beginning, right? So again, like we use it as a running record. Any conversation we're having, wherever the notes are, you might have, a separate phone interview notes guide where you're taking notes, but we always take the time to then transfer any relevant scorecard information to the scorecard.
And just one other thought there too is that we have folks, so when we create our interview guides, we often will align those to the competencies, so that the questions directly align to the competencies, so that folks are able to take notes in that note taker. But lots of folks actually like to take notes in a scorecard too. And so we sometimes will provide a blank scorecard that folks can take notes in as well, which can be really helpful and can add to the running record, cumulatively as well. And then as far as implementing a scorecard rating, I think the number one thing is just, creating a rating system that everybody can agree on. We don't necessarily recommend having a neutral option. It can be good to sort of force folks, so there's not, say, just an option that people can choose without having to force to think if this person is, meeting or not meeting the expectations. And then we definitely recommend norming. So really important to norm on those scores. So what does a 2 look like to Jonathan? What does a 2 look like to me? And talking about that and making sure that we're using common language and common scoring techniques. think that was our last question, and we're right at time. Is that right, Dane?
Yes, it looks like that will be it. If you do have a question that comes up later, please feel free to reach out to us. We are happy to answer those questions for you. And since you all did attend this webinar, Hadley and Jonathan are actually going to open up their schedules for you to choose a time to chat with them. So that will be, the link for those will be in the follow-up email that we'll send out. So definitely look for that in the email, and you can schedule some time with them. And yeah, thank you all so much for spending your time with us today. It means a lot that you are here to learn more about this. And yeah, thank you so much, and everyone have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Take care.